For the first time ever, I am thrilled to say we have an official sponsor for the Dirt Talk podcast, and that's Ariat. I've worn Ariat boots on every job site I've visited over the years, traveling in them across 5 continents. More importantly, I have yet to find a single project where working folks, unlike me, are not wearing Ariat boots and workwear in every condition imaginable. And there's really good reason for that, and that's because it's phenomenal stuff. And the more I've learned about Ariat and the company, the more I've loved their brand. So with this, Ariat is offering any Dirt Talk listener 10% off their next Ariat order at ariat.com/dirttalk. That's 10% off boots, jeans, and workwear at ariat.com/dirttalk or at the link in this episode's description. With that, let's get to the show. How'd you get into civil engineering? Why'd you choose civil?
I figured out I wanted to do engineering. It was either engineering or being a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I decided to do engineering. I went to mechanical because I wanted to do, either equipment or automotive or, power sports or vehicles or something like that.
Yeah.
And then did an internship with Kiewit and then decided that I wanted to go back to school to be a civil engineer. And I wanted to stay in the construction field because I liked it and it wasn't sitting behind a desk all day. So ended up with that.
Yeah. Mechanical, civil, similar but very different. Mechanical, things should move. Mm-hmm. Civil, things should not move.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much that's all there is to it.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yep.
So you were with Kiewit from a mechanical background.
Yeah, I started out in the equipment division. So growing up, my dad had a firewood and logging business, and we had a small farm. So I was always
logging
around.
Business.
Yeah,
Okay.
Firewood and logging. So he would either buy trees, process them, and sell. At the time, maybe a couple thousand cords of firewood a year.
Yeah.
Or he would, in the summer, in particular, or in the winter, dry part of the summer or over the winter, he would cut down trees from different landowners or his own property, and sell the logs and process the hardwood into firewood, which is a heating source in central Maine where I grew up.
Yeah, so Maine, it gets pretty cold in the winter, I've heard. I've never been there in the winter, but I've heard it gets pretty miserable.
It does.
It's funny. Well, if you look at a map, too, Maine is further north than a significant percentage of the population of Canada.
Sure.
It's pretty far up there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a mass timber business. It was...
No, that's further north in Maine. That's Millinocket area. That's north of Bangor. This is, there's a little bit of that where I grew up, but primarily where I grew up, it's dairy farms. And then a lot of the dairy farms have woodland, as much farmland,
Mm-hmm.
Fields that they have woodland, and that's what he kind of managed for the farmers.
Okay. So you were around, did he have some equipment? It was probably small scale stuff.
Yeah, so he made his own firewood processor.
Nice.
25, 30 foot long deal that he pulled behind a dump truck. He had a dump truck to haul 2.5, 3 quarts of firewood. Tractors, front loaders. After I graduated is when he started getting into skid steers and excavators and stuff like that. So we always had, construction equipment around. There's always construction going on. There's always, farm equipment that was used as construction equipment, but it was all, hydraulics. And so that's what I was learning a lot about growing up, welding, hydraulics. And it just kind of, that's kind of what I wanted to do when I got out of college. And then while I was there, I was like, I really like actually building this stuff. So I went that way. Those
firewood machines, they can get pretty fancy. Or some of them are pretty, they're all, it's just mesmerizing to watch them go. Because it's like, wow, you're really just making firewood with this machine. Like it can cut it, it can split it, it can sort out. Some of them I've seen, there's like a trommel in there. So it rolls them around to get the little bits off. It's like, geez, this is fancy.
Yeah, his does not have any of that.
I'm sure. Yeah, being more homemade, but it's probably still just as functional.
No, it's set up that he can run a, ideally is like a 10-inch, log at the butt through, and he just boom, 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 and then, but he can also take a gnarled up twisted piece and efficiently move it through that and get decent looking firewood in the back of the truck.
Nice. Yeah, being from Arizona, firewood was not a thing. You might put a fire on like at Christmas time, maybe just for fun, but then it kind of just makes the house a little too warm, so it's not that fun. You have to go buy the firewood from like the grocery store. Yeah. So it's I don't even know where that stuff's probably from, but definitely not in Arizona. It's from a long ways away. Yeah. It's all brought in, and it's like it's a completely excessive thing. Yeah. There's nothing about survival.
It's a decorative thing.
It's decorative, yes. Yeah, it's decorative. It's fun. Oh, we have a fire. How cozy is this? But in a place like Maine, it quite literally is survival.
Yeah, it's sustainable. It's a sustainable heat source.
Yeah.
I mean, the trees grow back. It's good for the forest to cut down the big ones.
Yeah.
And get them out and turn them into something useful instead of them just dying and flopping over in the woods.
That's what the people in the cities can't quite get through their heads, though, is the whole thing that trees grow back and woods need to be managed, and you can burn it for heat. It's like, where's your heat coming from? You don't even know, you jackwagon, so shut your mouth. And it's probably coming from gas more often than not. So you switch mechanical to civil. That's probably not that complicated of a switch.
No, I ended up with a minor in mechanical engineering because one of the class I needed to take counted for my civil. At one point I was in because of the time I switched, at one point I was in an introduction to civil engineering class, and then the next semester I had the same professor for a grad level civil engineering class, which was a 400 level mechanical engineering class.
I see.
And it just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, because I mean the first year of engineering school is probably almost the same for everybody.
Yeah, physics,
chemistry, calculus. Yeah.
A couple intro classes to your major.
Yeah.
Where you start kind of getting into the weeds of,
kind of worthless.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good to know what the difference between concrete and cement, it's good to know what aggregate is, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, the way, at least the way you Maine did it, it was a good foundation. So,
then you went into civil construction after school?
Yeah. So I had an offer from Kiewit after school, and I took that. I had done, I did an internship, it was a semester in summer. I went back and did the next summer, and then that next, when I graduated, I had the offer, and I just went right back to New York City and just kept going with Kiewit for a couple years.
When you were working in New York City, where were you living? So
they had like company apartment type deals up in like Nanuet, Nyack area. So over by what used to be the Tappan Zee Bridge, what is it, the Cuomo? Is it the Cuomo still?
Yeah, I can't say it. I can't pronounce it, but
something
it starts
like
with a K and ends with an O. Yeah.
I think it's actually a C, but who knows?
Maybe.
I don't
know. No, yeah. There's a C within it, I think. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
Yes.
I
know exactly what you're talking about, though. Yeah, you would have to have company housing to make it possible to live, I'm sure. Yeah. And you said it was like rail kind of work that you were working on. Or was it a little bit everything after
internship school? First internship was working for the equipment group, and I was on different job sites around the city.
Yeah.
I spent some time in Maryland because they had a yard in Aberdeen, and then I went out to Chicago for the last couple months because they needed some extra help out there because of just the way their work was flowing.
Yeah.
And then the second internship was the retaining wall on the Henry Hudson Parkway that collapsed, and I think it collapsed during my first internship in 2005, and then we rebuilt it in 2006, and then when I went back in 2007, that's the point where you got to find your own apartment and stuff like that. But it's a great opportunity because they're hiring 20, 25, field engineers or business managers and people right out of college. So you got instant friends, instant connections, and you can find a couple people to get an apartment together, and it just works out really well.
Yeah.
There's always stuff available. There's always people around, so it's a good opportunity.
So how long did you work at the Yellow and Black company?
So after the two internships, it was 2.5 years.
So a brief stint.
Yeah, I mean, it was
it's
great.
Just enough. Yeah,
it was a perfect learning opportunity,
yeah.
And it was a struggle to leave. I didn't want to leave so much. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I was learning so much, but it was a really good opportunity. I mean, I wouldn't have traded it for anything, and I recommended many people do something similar again.
Totally.
You can just learn so much, and they're so good at what they do.
They're
so good.
Still, at the large scale, one of the finest contractors I've ever been around. And they're good, and they know they're good. Is how I explain it. They're aware that they're that good. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But it's the systems that they have, and it's like, oh, we need this software to do this better. Okay, we'll just build it. It's like, what do you mean you'll just build it? Oh, we'll just build it. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's how you do things. You just, whatever you need, you just make it yourself. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, they do stuff the right way. They track stuff the right way. They've gone through the ringer before. They know what they're doing. They have their policies. It's a condition of employment. You just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And everything takes care of itself. It's great.
But and this isn't just this company. I mean, it's every big company. The big contractor circuit, I'll call it. It's a tough way of life as well. Yeah. It can be hard because you really don't know where you're going to be next week.
In New York City, you did.
Okay.
Yeah, because you knew you were going to be in New York City.
Okay.
There was no point in moving you out. There was so much work.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, I was never worried about that at all. It wasn't my experience. I'm sure it has been for other people, but it wasn't my experience. So.
Yeah, I was, there's been some people, it's like, I mean, every 6 months you're moving to a different state. It's like, man, that. And the experience, you can't beat that level of experience, but it's also not for everybody. No. And New York City's not for everybody. Every time I go to New York, there's a few places that just stress me out. New York City's one of those places. California, anywhere in California stresses me out. New York City, Chicago, there's just places, there's just so much going on, too much going on. New York City and the construction, the way I explain a New York City and even a Boston, it's like this microcosm. It's not the U.S. construction industry. It's its own entity, I feel like it's its own thing. There's rules there that are either written or not written that everybody understands and abides by. And that's just the way we do it in Manhattan and even the surrounding areas. That way of doing things doesn't exist anywhere else. And even just like the mentality's different and the conditions are different because of the sheer complexity that is putting a shovel in the ground in a place that complex, especially underground. There's just so much to it that is so much more complicated than most other places I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything has to be, calculated, checked, double checked, whether it's trying to get something there on time, trying to get, a regular service of, concrete or whatever, some type of aggregate.
Yeah.
It's just everything is more complicated and everything's in more in demand. Everything is just harder, but it's a great experience. I mean, it's a good learning experience.
Well, if you can build in Manhattan, you can build anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty confident to say like it doesn't get a whole lot more complicated than a job site in Manhattan.
I mean, I've worked in a few other cities since then. I've worked in the middle of nowhere. There's some places in the middle of nowhere it gets real hard too.
I'm sure.
Real hard.
Yeah. I'm not. It's not the hardest by any stretch of the imagination. And like the whole, I don't like to play the game. Oh, I'm tougher than you, or oh wow, yeah, congratulations, it's fucking cold where you are. Yeah, awesome, you're so tough, or oh, it's so hot. Good for you. It's hard to build stuff anywhere, but that's like advanced level. I would say. Even when I was at it's like there's some fancy name for it. They're building the big wall around part of the city right now for flooding.
Oh yeah,
because the river keeps flooding like a significant portion of the city, which is it's like that's a problem. That's probably something to fix. So they're building this gigantic wall that's essentially going to be this park, but they have to. All the soil is contaminated, so it's like we have to get rid of the contaminated soil. So it's like. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of yards of contaminated stuff they had to pull out of here before they started doing the building. And then they were taking it with a crane and putting it on barges and shipping it out via barge. I was like, why are you doing that? And they're like, are you dumb? Like, are we going to put it in trucks and send it across the bridges? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course you would send all your material in and out by barge. That makes perfect sense. But it's like, that doesn't happen in really anywhere else other than maybe like St. Louis or something like that. So even that is unique. Just okay, we need a certain amount of material. It's gonna. I mean, if you need crushed stone in Manhattan, that's not coming from anywhere close. From anywhere close. So just getting a truck of crushed stone, that's complicated. Everything's complicated.
Yeah. Everything is complicated. It's a challenge to get something to the job site, especially in certain parts of the city or certain, the north part of the city is easier than downtown on Wall Street. But everything's hard there.
Yeah. So after the Manhattan deal what else do you do in the construction world?
So I moved up to Denver at that point. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, worked for a company, and she got transferred to Denver. And it was just one of the places that she could get transferred that I could find a job in, construction, civil engineering. And I ended up, over the next, I guess, 9 years or so, working for just different, smaller contractors, oil and gas industry. I ended up working for Denver RTD, doing capital cost estimating, because I kind of got sick of traveling and being gone all the time, or being in the middle of nowhere.
What's RTD?
Oh, Regional Transportation District.
Okay.
It's Denver's bus and train system.
Okay.
And then I did that for a couple of years, and then I went out and worked doing capital cost estimating at Denver International Airport. So I worked right on the airport. If you go through Concourse A security, there's an office building to your left.
Okay.
On that, what they call bridge security, and there's 5 or 6 floors there of offices. So I had an office there, and I worked for a consulting firm and just did staff augmentation work, and I just estimated every airside or landside project to compare it to what the contractors are coming up with, as far as change orders and new work, and they're constantly replacing the all of the utilities and concrete around each of the concourses. They're constantly taking out chunks of runways and taxiways, just every year.
So your job was basically estimating that work, so that you had a benchmark, so that when you go put it out to bid and the contractors say you come up with 80 million and the contractor says 120 million, you're like, one, we don't have that in the budget because we based our budget on 80 million. Two, can you and it's not that simple.
No.
But you need a benchmark.
Benchmark, yeah.
And usually that's called, when it comes to public work, the engineer's estimate.
Yeah. For
people that don't know.
Yeah.
But then with airports or private work, it starts to get trickier because there's not necessarily, you don't technically. It's a different process, I guess.
You have your historical costs from years prior.
Yeah.
Doing, you can take a kind of a chunk out of this job and a chunk out of this one, and this contractor did this, and it's not super complicated until they come to you and they're like, "Hey, how much is it going to cost for us to build a new runway?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, $1 billion, maybe. Something like that, roughly.
Yeah.
Plus or minus a couple $100 million.
Uh-huh.
And but yeah, no, it was really cool. It was a really good experience. It was there. I mean, that's. At the time, it was the 5th largest airport in the country, or sorry, I think in the world. I can't remember. I can never keep it straight, but it was one of the busiest airports in the world. It's actually gotten busier, or the other ones have gotten smaller, and it's higher up on the list now.
Yeah.
But I mean, they move so many passengers through there, and they, I wasn't involved in the inside building stuff. So in the Great Hall, but they were starting to do the Great Hall stuff when I left. But they just, they're redoing Pena Boulevard now, and they're all, but I mean, just rebuilding parking lots, putting in electrical.
That, I feel like
they probably do.
I forget who's out there. I saw
remember.
somebody out there. I was like, oh yeah.
It's
I'm pretty sure it is Kiewit out there.
It's when I was there, it was IHC, which is now Clyde, and Flatiron were the 2 big civil contractors, and then there was a lot of smaller civil contractors.
Well, Flatiron, they've been out on the runways, taxiways for a while. I think they're still out there.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, every year they're doing something new. They're making high speed taxiways. They're replacing the runway concrete. By they inspect it every summer or fall, and then they cut out 35-foot squares and repave it every year. They're redoing lights constantly. They're redoing signals. They're redoing
drainage.
The marketing boards. Yeah. Trying to keep wildlife out of the area. I had one of the projects I worked on was redoing the drainage so that their birds and deer wouldn't get as close to the runway, because you smack one of those with a Boeing, you get a really big problem.
Yeah, you don't want standing water next to a
it just brings wildlife in there, and that's not a good thing. So and they got divisions of people out there taking care of that kind of stuff. It's 54 square miles of some runways and taxiways and just property they own around it, and future expansion areas. It's just staggering what they do out there. It's an amazing airport. It's amazing. It's just an amazing thing, and it's so far away from Denver, but it is just it is really. I mean, in my mind, from what I've seen and what I've heard and the research I did, it's just expanded that Denver area, that Denver metro, so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, they built in the middle of nowhere initially, but now the whole city has started. I mean, really filled in almost around it now.
Yeah,
it's
just
crazy.
The warehouses and stuff going out Pena. Greenwood Village expansion, reunion with Commerce City area coming over to the towards 470 or Northwest. I guess 470. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're expanding the airport too now. I saw that was announced, like a significant expansion. I mean, it's like $1 billion project.
They're probably building another runway. I think they're probably going to build another. The master plan on that, if I remember correctly, was like they have 6 right now. The master plan was 8 runways and multiple more concourses.
I feel like they're building a whole new concourse. Yeah, I think that's what
Probably.
it was. Yeah, it's like a pretty significant change. I will say that's one of my least favorite airports to fly into.
You can get your steps in.
That's why I hate it, because it's like you fly into C, and then you fly into one of the far gates in C, and I have a rental car. So it's like, well, thank goodness I packed my like lunchbox and my snacks and everything I need for a hike, because I am about to go on a hike. Like the time it takes from me to from the time I touch down to drive out of the gates of my rental car, and the time it takes for me to touch down and drive into Denver. It's a long time. There's so many steps in between those two things. It's like, and then you fly in at the wrong time, and then it takes even longer to get into Denver. And I know it's like, I know planning and this and that, and if you need to build a new airport, you got to put it somewhere people aren't. I get all that. It's just a chore.
I lived outside. I lived in the east side of Boulder County most of the time that I worked at the airport, and I would, my drive was like 35 minutes or whatever. But then it was another 20, 25, 30 minutes to get from where I was going to park if I didn't take the bus, and hoof it all the way into my office through people that are pulling suitcases and just like and then eventually when they started doing the Great Hall, they're like, where do I go?
Yeah.
There's a wall there now, and I don't know. There's a wall there now. I usually go right through there.
Yeah, yeah.
No, they just, it's a huge operation, It's just moving the people. The amount of people that got to work there, the amount of people that, on the land side stuff, on the air side stuff, it's just staggering.
Yeah. So what is it that you do?
So nowadays I work for a consulting firm, a construction consulting firm, and
you better elaborate, because that doesn't sound very exciting.
It's actually really exciting. And so we provide expert witness testimony for basically construction litigation projects or problems. Let's put it that way. So, contractor, finishes the job late or gets delayed. A lot of times your contracts are going to say, get the work done. We'll figure it out later. Well, when you got to figure it out later, we got to do, a certain amount of forensic analysis needs to be done to figure out, whether it's a schedule analysis or damages, productivity, impacts. Basically just looking over all the documentation that you got on the job and putting together a story or maybe not a story, but putting together a report, analyzing it correctly and scientifically and putting it together and displaying it to the different parts of the litigation process, whether it's mediation, arbitration, if you're going in front of a judge or a jury.
Yeah.
We are experts, or the people that testify are experts, and their job is to assist the trier of fact in, understanding the nuances and the technical aspect of, in our case, construction.
So I'm going to try to back up here. I know you know all this stuff, but just for the sake of simplicity, I like to try to break things down a little simpler. So a common case is a project blows past the deadline, but then it's just like, figure it out, just get the job done, we'll figure it out. And then what happens is the contractor's like, well, we don't really want to pay for this. Mm-hmm. And then the owner's like, well, we don't really want to pay for this. Mm-hmm. So you have both sides not wanting to pay for the overrun.
Of course.
And so what you do is you work for one of the sides, mm-hmm. To build the case, mm-hmm. to explain why it's not their fault.
Yep. Pretty much that's a good way to understand it.
Yeah.
So a nuance to that is your attorney is an advocate for you. For they are going to advocate for your on your case. We are
fact finders.
A fact finder. We are not an advocate.
Uh-huh.
We are taking data, whether it's testimony, deposition, whether it's, a schedule, a cost report, submittals, design changes, all of those records, and we are explaining why something happened the way it did. So, but we're also come in and help.
Who hires you?
So we are retained. We are typically retained by an attorney
who's representing a contractor.
Who's representing a contractor.
Okay.
But I mean, we're not going to ever get retained by an attorney that the contractor doesn't say yes, hire those guys.
Yeah. Okay.
So we don't work directly for the contractors, just for the legal aspect of it. We get retained by the attorney.
Okay.
Now, there's situations where we come in a little bit earlier and we help write a claim because our office has done it, or any consultant's office has written claims before. And there's to a certain extent, there's an art to it. And if you want to get the case sorted out and not spend all the money on litigation, you write a good claim that's, honest and accurate, and better chance it's going to get sorted out. So sometimes on those, we will get retained by the contractor, but when it's going to go to litigation, we switch it over to the attorney.
Sure. Yeah. So they, but it's sometimes internal counsel, or is it always external counsel?
In my experience, it's always external counsel. I'm sure there's situations where
and they'll probably have internal too, but there's a reason why they call contractors. They don't call them builders.
No. No, this is something I learned on day one at Kiewit. It's like, building is easy, contracting is hard.
Yeah.
So it's definitely true.
And it's only gotten more litigious. And I have my thoughts and opinions on that. I think everybody loses but the lawyers as it just gets more and more and more and more and more and more and more. Mm-hmm. I'm not the biggest fan of the legal profession, and my father's a lawyer. Sure. I grew up around it. I respect it. I think it is necessary, but I'm not like, I don't love lawyers. Mm-hmm. I don't love the legal profession. But there's every project has a contract, and that contract is agreed upon before the project starts. Mm-hmm. In the perfect world. Mm-hmm. And then that contract dictates essentially how the money flows through the project and after the project.
Yeah, the contract is just a risk transfer device. It's the owner wants to transfer the completion of this thing to somebody else so they get it done. So, okay, I'll give you a sum of money, you get this done. The contractor then, the general contractor then takes it and turns it around and says, okay, I'm going to give you drainage sub this much risk, you paving sub this much risk, allocate it out, and then I'm going to transfer a certain amount of risk to my insurance company.
Yeah.
And it's all about your risk management essentially, and to get everything done at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you have to be doing it nowadays. I haven't met any lawyers that want to do this every day. It's it just seems like at some point in, I don't know if it's recent history, it was before my time, but it just became a part, that this litigation at the end of the project became a part of the construction process. It just, it's like, all right, this is how we're going to get these cases sorted out, or this particular case sorted out. Our contract says this. We're not going to do anything else. We're just going to let a judge decide, let an arbitrator decide.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, there's plenty of cases that never come across my desk or any consultant's desk, but the ones that do, sometimes it's just part of the process. Sometimes it's mistakes or people being fed information that they don't understand, that are the ones making the decision. Throughout the course of the job, they're hearing it's the contractor's fault. It's the contractor's fault. I've had plenty of these cases where the project manager is telling the executive it's their fault, and then you come in, you write a report, you put a mediation presentation together, and you just look at their faces and they're going, what? This all makes sense. Mm-hmm. But this is exactly the opposite of what you've been telling me for the last 2 years. And, they come to an amicable solution because nobody wants to push that through the rest of the trial process. It's super expensive. Super time consuming. But
this is why I'm just like, this is one of actually the big reasons why I didn't go in the big construction contractor route. That just didn't appeal to me at all, because you're almost trained to put the risk on others. Like it's just and it's not their fault. Like, the system they work in, but it's like the whole time you're just like how do I cover my ass more and more and more and more and more and more from a management perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, my whole job actually is not really about building stuff. It's really about doing paperwork and documentation so that we're covered here from a liability standpoint. It's like, that's not what I want to do. I want to build stuff. I want to actually create in the world. But these big mega, especially these mega projects, it's like, I mean, I know it's very common now where it'll be a joint venture, tri-venture, and one of the partners involved is really just handling the contracts and the paperwork and the financing to just make the thing go. And then you have a partner that's actually building the job, because that's what's required now to execute anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, stuff is built so much differently nowadays than it was in the past, and there's so much more environmental risk, or safety requirements. There's just so many more stakeholders, so many more people have a voice. There's just so much more going on in construction. I mean, granted, there always was, but it just feels like there's even more nowadays.
Yeah,
I would say, in my experience, there's the small contractors and the big contractors get involved in just as much stuff. It really comes down to how far the case goes and how much it gets argued. Comes down to what kind of documentation you have, what kind of really comes down to the people you have out on the site. There's some people that would never, some project managers, some project executives that would never have a case come across my desk, and there's some that probably would have 5 or 6 in their career. It's just because there's just ways to deal with stuff. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's client, sometimes it's contractor, sometimes it's sub. It's just there's no rhyme or reason to what happens. It happens to everybody. It could happen to everybody.
It does happen to everybody, but it certainly happens to more people than others.
Sure.
And I don't think it has to happen all the time. Like, I think there are contractors I think that are like looking for a fight. Like, they almost enjoy, like, yeah, let's fucking go. Like, let's do it. And certainly, project managers or people, like, they're ready to, they're just, they just like that. They almost like the sport of it. Like,
it's like they just want to try to screw somebody over.
Yeah.
And it's gonna end up on a consultant's
prove
desk.
my point. I'm gonna prove that I'm right here. But there are contractors, I know a lot of them, that they don't get into a lot of trouble and a lot of litigation because I think they do a lot of things before they know that is the absolute least resort, because in litigation, really at the end of the day, the only people that truly just win straight up legal, they win. Like, the house always wins. It's like gambling. The house always wins in the legal system. So they want to prevent it from happening. And then that starts with, like you were saying, how they teach their frontline managers on just how to even communicate. Because I've seen this. Like, you go into a meeting, and if you go into it from like a combative, like, I've seen, you've probably seen this too. You're sitting in a meeting, everybody's goal is the same, and yet it's just like, what's going on here? Why are we fighting? Like, what's the disagreement? Like, are we all trying to do? Are we all here for the same goal? So how can we figure this out and work together, instead of just digging our heels in and being like, well, no, not my problem. It's your problem.
Sometimes it comes down to things get fought just because somebody doesn't have the money. I mean, I've been involved in cases where we call them bet the company cases,
totally.
Where, especially a smaller contractor, it's like, you're a general contractor and your developer or something that you're doing the work for, runs out of money, and they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to start blaming stuff on you. And that's when you go back and do the forensic analysis and you figure out, like, hey, this is this, and this. And it's too bad because it costs money for the contractor to do that. And if they don't have, the reserves to pay for their experts and their attorneys, they're, if they can weather it, they're good for getting what they should have gotten 3 years ago. But, there's plenty of times that doesn't happen. It's too bad that it's like that. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's how it works. It's awesome. You feel so good when it's like, okay, we finally like wore them down, and we did everything we could do. We proved to everybody that needed to be proved to that our contractor didn't do something wrong, and they finally give up, and they just, all right, I can't spend any more money. Usually it comes with some type of acquisition of that particular company, and they're just like they get acquired by somebody else, and they're like, why are we dealing with this? Get this out. Get this away. Yeah, let's make this go away, and then they pay the money, and everybody's happy. If that, our side's happy. So most of the time.
Yeah. I've tried to wrap my head around this whole side of the business, and I don't have my thoughts even remotely put together on all this. It's just I think this whole environment, though, it has been. We work with a lot of contractors, and a lot of times it's like combative for no reason, and I'm just like, hey, I'm not trying to screw you over here. But then me saying that's like, well, this guy, he's for sure trying to screw me. Like, they're just so they've been so beat up for decades, some of these people, that it's all about just cover. Like, no. We are going to make sure this, and even negotiating some things with these contracts, like, especially when I was beginning, I'd give them a half-page agreement that basically says, I'll do, what I say I'm going to do. You do what you say you're going to do, and we should be fine here. And then I get it back from the council, and it'll be, 18 pages. I'm like, what's happening here? I want to
take some pictures.
What's going on, guys?
You want me to take some pictures? Just let me go. Just let me do it.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, I get it, but I'm also, me being naive, scratching my head like, what's happening here? But how?
I want to say on that. So I had a case recently that actually we just got the decision on, that I could tell throughout the whole duration of it that the general manager, the president of the company, was just like, this was his first time going through something like this, and he was just like, these guys cost this much. I'm paying this much for my attorney.
Yeah.
He was good, but it was just like, it was a kind of a struggle to work for him. And we just got the decision that, everything that our report included, they got paid for. They didn't have to pay any liquidated damages, and all of their attorneys and expert fees got reimbursed by the other side. So whether they collect on it or not, great question. Can't help them there. But, some jurisdictions, you can get your attorney's fees and your expert fees back, which is always nice, and that's what we aim for. And it's really nice when that happens.
So something happens on a project, huge cost overrun, way delayed. They get an attorney. They're saying this wasn't our fault because, say, the ground conditions. They started digging, and the
unforeseen conditions.
The geotech report. No, none of this was in here, and so the schedule was just blown as soon as they put that shovel in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But then the owner says, no, that's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
Per the contract, you're responsible for ground conditions. Okay, and then so they go get a lawyer. They're like, we're not paying for this, and then that's when they bring you in.
Mm-hmm. Usually at the end of the job.
At the end, when they job's done. Yeah, job's done.
When they don't get the job completed on time and they spend a lot of extra money.
Yep. So they're out, tons of money, job's done. Bring in a lawyer. We've got to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
You come in. What does that process look like? Where do you start?
So we're gonna get as many documents as we can / you want to give us. We're gonna look at cost reports. Hopefully you got accurate status cost reports. You had a solid estimate that you put together, and hopefully it's in some type of estimating software or Excel. It doesn't matter. I mean, the beauty of what we do and the beauty of the way the system works, we can do whatever we can with the documents available. If you got basically nothing, you obviously built that job off basically nothing. So we can still work with what you got. I mean, there's been plenty of jobs that I've had very, very few documents and no cost reports, and they've been successful. But in general, you're talking about your relatively, or at least you're a very sophisticated contractor. You got cost reports, you got schedules, you got change orders, you got a contract, and we're gonna take all that stuff. We can get into RFIs, you can get into all of your individual submittals. You can First, okay, let me back up a little bit. Before we even do that, we're going to have a conversation with you. And you're going to tell us what went wrong and where and when. And then we're going to take all that stuff and we're going to, essentially we have to check that what you're saying is correct. I had one case because I came from the heavy civil world. And I do a lot of heavy civil projects, but I also do a lot of general contracting projects. There's a lot of buildings that end up in our desk. And I had a commercial project, a building project. They were rehabbing an old building to build out, offices in the future. So they were changing out the electrical system and the bus panels and the fire sprinkler system and all that stuff. And contractor is like, we're definitely have some liability here because we didn't get our glazing done on time. And I was like, okay, take it and look at it, and looking at their schedules. And I'm like, well, a couple of days, looking at a bunch of stuff. That was just like one little piece of what was going on. I'm looking at the schedules and I'm like, yeah, but sure, you didn't get your glazing done on time, but look at these pictures. You're protecting all of the HVAC system that you're installing. You're protecting all the new electrical work. The panels, the actual glazing not being there did not slow your critical path down.
Yeah.
It may have hindered you a little bit. You may have had to put an extra guy on there. You may have spent some money on it, but you owned that mistake. And he didn't argue with me for a couple of days, but it basically took me saying that for like 3 weeks for him to be like, oh yeah, we didn't delay the critical path with the glazing. We did all that stuff, and we just kept on going. And it's how you manage the job. We're really trying to figure out how you manage the job, how you did what you did, and telling that story to somebody that probably doesn't understand it. Your mediators, your arbiters are probably going to understand construction on a pretty good level because they've been construction attorneys for years. Your judges and your juries are not. You really got to tell a story that they can understand.
Yeah.
Through the report, through diagrams, through pictures, through figures, through everything. And
so, and to explain the difference between mediation, arbitration to litigation, big difference there. Mediation's arbitration is, based on everything I know, the preferred way to go, because that's basically there's somebody who is probably an attorney in between both parties trying to reach an agreement between both parties.
Yeah. So your mediation is going to be you're gonna do some discovery, which is trading documents. Basically, anything you do on a site on a project is going to be if it does go to a litigation, that's going to be shared. Emails. Yeah. I've had cases with text messages. It's not super common.
Yeah.
All of your cost reports, all of your documents, the other side's going to get, and vice versa. The owner's going to have to hand over everything to their to the contractor. And that's a good kind of time to say we will do work for anybody in the construction industry. We'll do owners, sureties, contractors, subcontractors, everybody. We do a lot of surety work. We do some insurance work. We represent owners. We represent general contractors and subcontractors. We can come back to it later, but we also do some like personal injury stuff too. So, but we're talking about the damage and delay stuff right now. I lost my train of thought a little bit on that one, but yeah, all the documents are going to get traded back and forth. Okay, so then typically the way that it'll work is the experts will write a report, will educate, get information from the contractor, will educate the attorneys, will kind of help come up with or at least this is the way that we do it. We'll help be a part of the, to a certain extent, the legal team. Maybe depositions will happen, maybe they won't. A lot of times we'll write depositions for either project managers and people on the site. Sometimes, or we'll usually write deposition questions for experts that are getting depoed that are on the other side.
Yeah.
And then, usually the first step, and it's usually contractually required, is go to mediation, which is, somebody that has been educated. They get a brief, 10 pages or whatever, and they know what's going on in the project. They know one side's story, they know the other side's story, and they try to convince each side to either get closer to the middle or come to some type of agreement. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works that day or a couple of days that they plan to do it. Sometimes mediation works 6 months later.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but it's usually contractually required. Typically, construction contracts are going to have a requirement that if mediation doesn't work, they go to arbitration. Arbitration is essentially just a well-versed construction attorney that is, or a panel of construction attorneys that are listening to essentially a trial. It's handled just like a trial, and they're listening to each side go back and forth. And there's multiple different ways to do it. Essentially, it's like a judge, but it's construction attorney, former construction attorneys or construction attorneys
Who don't have skin in the game.
Don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the other option is a trial with by a judge.
And if that doesn't, so that.
Well, no, a lot of times it's arbitration is the end. Sometimes it can go past that. Sometimes they don't do arbitration and they go straight to a judge or a jury. Personal injury cases are typically, or always a jury trial.
Sure.
Just because that's how it works.
Yeah.
But a lot of times your damage and delay cases are handled by arbitration panels, arbiters or arbitration panels. When you get into federal stuff, federal and state government type stuff, you end up going to the trial. And
it depends what state you're in too.
Sure.
And what kind of project it is and who the project's for. It's different everywhere. It's different everywhere.
But lucky for me, the attorneys figure all that out and
Sure.
they just tell us. I mean, we're basically doing the same thing whether we're talking to a judge, an arbitration panel, or a jury. That's
all it is collect information, disseminate it into here's our side of the story. I'm sure it happens sometimes where you get the information and realize they're not in the right here. The other side actually has a much better case. Does that happen? I mean, I'm sure that happens.
Yeah. I mean, in our policy, we want to bring that up. We want to tell the person that's, got to hear that, like, hey, you got, a lot of times it's not the whole case. A lot of times it's a piece of the case. It's like, hey, you're kind of banking on this, but you have this, this, and this. We need to either, we need to be ready for that, or we need to concede that so we can focus on the real issues. Because we don't want to. We're not going to write a report. We're not going to lie. We're not going to stretch the truth. We're not going to blatantly miss something or skip something, just because it's not a good thing to hear.
Well, because I'm sure like these are big companies. There's projects everywhere, and so I'm sure this happens all the time where this project goes off the rails a little bit, but senior leadership has no idea. And then it goes to this level where they're in some hot water financially. They've got to figure this out. No, our people, like, we're buttoned up. But then you probably dig in, you're like, actually, I'm sorry, but XYZ clearly does not show that you have anything buttoned up. Yeah. And I'm sure that's happened.
Yeah, it happens a lot. You know, and that's great. I mean, if we can write a report, somebody reads that report and says, I'm not going to fight this. I'm going to pay 75 cents on the dollar.
So then they'll settle. Yeah.
They settle.
Okay.
And that's great. We prefer it. We love it. Our goal is to get the case to settle. Trials are the epitome of like competition and just like showing how much you can do and doing your best and like, just really being involved and seeing everything come together. They also really suck. There's been plenty of times I've been on the phone at 9, 10, 30, midnight trying to strategize for what's going on the next day. Yeah. What questions are they going to ask in cross-examination? What's the next step? What do we need to do? Do we need to do a separate analysis? They said this. Do we need to counter that with something else? How are we going to pull that into testimony when we don't have it in our report already? There's so many different things. Trials are interesting, but they're not fun.
Well, and I think television and movies make them to be a lot sexier than they really are.
Yeah.
And I think like
I've never had a Judge Judy type situation on any ones that I've been a part of.
Well, and when you think of a trial, you think of like, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like something like that. But it's like that's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's not how it works.
No, and it's I've learned too, it's not always about who's right either. It's there is some gamesmanship to it, and it is we're gonna concede here but fight here and do this or do that or but that's the lawyer's responsibility. Mm-hmm. You don't really have anything involved in that.
No, we don't have anything involved in that. We're gonna help strategize. We're gonna understand, and we're gonna portray it across, make sure everybody understands what we can see. Because we'll do these technical schedule analysis or productivity or analysis. We'll say like, hey, let's use this study because it supports this particular part of the case. And it's nothing we're doing is wrong. It's just you gotta strategize appropriately, and that's part of the game.
Yeah, there's a lot to this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to this.
When I first started doing this for like 4 months, when I go home, I'd just be like, why do I have a headache every single day? It's like using your brain in a different type of muscle every day. It's crazy.
And it's like every job is this different puzzle to figure out.
Yeah, we describe it as if we're interviewing somebody that's coming out, somebody that wants to come to work as a consultant, and they're coming out of being a project manager or something for a GC or heavy civil contractor. It's like, so you got a 5,000 piece puzzle, 3-dimensional, of course. There's no picture of what the puzzle looks like, and you got about half of the pieces. So go figure it out.
Yeah,
that's what we do every day. That's what the lawyers do. That's what we do, essentially every day. And it's fun. It's unfortunate that we're involved, but when you find yourself in that situation, you want to have a good attorney. You want to have a good consultant that's gonna help you prevail at the end of the day.
And every contract is different too.
I mean, you got your
there
boilerplate
standard
AIAs and consensus docs and blah, blah, blah. But yes,
Sure.
in general. And a lot of times, GC will use their same contract. So we do a lot of work for the same GCs. We kind of know their contracts.
Yeah.
They know their contracts. We don't really have to so much in what we do. We don't have to get involved in much more than a handful of sections of the contract. We're not worried about a lot of the contract. We're worried about the schedule portion. We're worried about the notice requirements. We're worried about some certain pieces of it. But if you got a 500-page contract, I'm reading 10, 20 pages, and you're giving me a summary of the rest of it because you don't need me reading the whole thing.
Based on your experience here, say I'm a project manager out in the field. I don't want to be involved in this kind of stuff. I want to build good work. I want to be fair, and then I just want to go to the next one. What can I do? What can I be thinking about? What should I be doing to make sure that I'm doing my best and I'm keeping good records? What do the best people out in the field that you've seen based on this side of things do? Like, what do the best people out in the field do? And what do the best companies do?
It's a good question. When I was at Keywood, it was, the one of the other mantras was, if you don't write it down, you don't record it, it didn't happen. So, there's a reason for doing all that stuff. Keeping good records, keeping accurate cost reports, regularly updating stuff. Something as simple as when you get a change order, adjusting your cost report correctly so we don't have to go back and spend a bunch of time figuring out if you did that. I was literally on a phone call this morning. We got to figure that out right now on a case that we have. So there's kind of two things. There's how do you stay out of this problem? And then there's, if you do find yourself in this problem, how can you do it the most economically possible? So how to stay out of it is, it's a lot of it is relationships and knowing the owner that you're getting involved in, if you're the contractor, or knowing the contractor you're hiring, knowing that they're capable and competent to do the work or pay for the work. That's obviously big, but yeah, there's nothing more important than keeping an accurate, updated cost report and accurate, updated schedules, doing what you're supposed to be doing throughout the duration of the job. Just following your contract is definitely helpful. If you do, there's plenty of times that you can do all that stuff and you got a bad owner. You got, financial collapse 2007, 2008. People don't have any money. And you find yourself in situations having that, I know when I worked for Keywood, it was like you open up the job folder and it was, structured. You got, your costs are in one folder, your schedule's in another folder, your submittals, your RFIs, It's just, there's 40 folders there. If you can just give me that whole database and everything in there is, organized, you got your drafts, you got your final, you got your signed, of whether it's for a change order or any other document, it just makes a consultant's or an attorney's life so much easier to, put a report together for $50,000 instead of $80,000 or something like that. Just rough numbers, throwing that out there depending on what's going on. So yeah, bottom line, just being organized, recording stuff and being accurate and being honest and being truthful, it's going to help you out a lot. It's going to keep you out of it. And if you do get into it, it's going to make it go faster.
Yeah. I do think, relationships are not to be understated here.
Sure.
because in reading the book about Peter Kiewit, maybe I've told this story before, but
like Uncommon Man or something like that.
Maybe it's an old book.
Yeah.
And it has like a painting of him on the front cover.
Okay.
It's a very good book. But it talks about his whole life, and Kiewit really started to go off World War II with all the government contracts for the U.S. military. And they were building barracks, and the barracks were, you build a barrack, and you build a barrack, and you build a barrack, and you build. They're all just pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. And there'd be inspectors that would come through and do their punch list at the end of every barrack. Okay, I want this change, and then, and then we have to go dispatch, another crew to go fix those different things, and each one's different. What's going on? And what I've seen a lot of is you pretty quickly blame the inspector. This guy sucks. And he or she could fully, you could be right. They might totally suck. Mm-hmm. I've seen great inspectors. I've seen bad inspectors. I've seen inspectors that they're just there for a paycheck. They do what their job says, nothing more. But instead of that, Kiewit employed people to, their sole job was to just understand what the inspectors looked for. Mm-hmm. And so they would get to know each one of the inspectors. They'd build relationships with each one of the inspectors. Mm-hmm. They would figure out what each one of the inspectors really looked at. This inspector really looks into doors. And so then that individual would go inspect the barracks before the inspector would get there and say, hey, this guy, he's going to be looking at this. You got to fix this stuff. Then the inspector comes through. No issues. Mm-hmm. Miraculous. Mm-hmm. Miraculous. Because they developed the relationships to then, and it's not that simple anymore. But in a way, it is that simple. It still is. All of this is still human beings. The whole thing. The government, human beings. Contractors, subcontractors, anybody involved, surety companies, insurance, they're all human beings. So that's not going to get you out of everything. But I think developing the right relationships will keep you away from a lot of this. And teaching people out in the field who are interacting with these people, if they do have those right relationships, I really think that, and call me naive, but I do think a lot of this can be avoided.
I don't think I've had a case where somebody's come to me and said, like, hey, we have a great relationship with this person, and we're still coming to you if you need help. I mean, he's a
good buddy of mine, but we've got to screw him on this one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was one of those things that was that I picked up from Kiewit. It's like, do these, you have to do these particular tasks. You have to do these, we got to know where we are at all points in times on the costs, the schedule or whatever. We got to know on your individual operations, which all helps if it did go to some type of claim situation, it's like, okay, well, we got a year's worth of records of what we were doing on this particular job and where where our productivity or our production started falling down. And, we can, show other documents that say it's because of this, and this. And the good ones had it already marked on there and stuff. But yeah, I mean, relationships are key. It really, really is. Whether it's within the company, within, executive to executive, project manager, owner to GC, it's super important. Really, really, really important. And it saves so much, time, money, effort, exhaustion,
stress just for you.
Just stress.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to a time, young engineer, we had a subcontractor who was just a pain in the ass. I mean, they were just a royal pain in the ass. And this contractor, they hit the same gas line 3 times. Mm-hmm. Same one. And, I looked at it, you just immediately go into the defensive and immediately go into the us versus them mentality. Like, these guys are just pieces of shit. Like, and then once you start going down that path, there's no coming back. And so then you just hate these people and this company more and more and more and more and more. Instead of, like, I'm thinking about this now. It's like, man, I wish I would have just, like, gotten to know these guys a little bit better. and maybe, like, I don't know, talked to them.
Novel concept.
Like, I'm sitting here like, man, I don't know if it would have helped or not, but I didn't do that. Because it wasn't my problem. We weren't liable. It was ultimately our project. It was ultimately the police and fire department coming out for us and our pickup trucks in the middle of the road with people turning around out of there and swearing at us.
Yeah, the GC was the one on the news. It wasn't so much the sub that hit the gas line.
And it wasn't. This wasn't like a 12-inch gas line. It really small services, so it wasn't that big of a deal at the end of the day. But I'm just thinking through. I'm like, man, if I don't develop better relationships, there's maybe it would have made no difference, but it wouldn't have hurt the situation by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and more than likely it would have saved time, exhaustion, money to help them out. And yeah, maybe you got to financially fix that, but it's so much better off to pay for a locate versus have the gas line get hit 3 times. So,
or even I'm going to go even simpler than this. There was an example the other day, and maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but we're going back from Australia to the United States. Australia and other countries, for whatever reason, I don't understand why, and it's probably there's probably some legal reason or financial reason. There's a reason somewhere, but I don't quite understand it. Here in the United States, weight doesn't really matter. If I'm going to carry on a bag, weight doesn't matter unless I'm with like a potato airline like Spirit or something like that. Then they weigh your bags. But if I'm on American, Delta, any of those, they're not going to pull out a scale and weigh my shit. But they're really strict on it needs to be every piece of luggage like 10 kilograms or like 15 kilograms. Our bags are way over that. But both of them. But I don't like to check bags because we have cameras and stuff. We're moving quickly. I can't afford to go to another country, get my bag lost. Like, we're just sinking so much time and energy into these trips. I got to be moving, so I don't check anything. But technically speaking, we're supposed to check one of our bags. However, it's kind of arbitrary because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Once you're on the plane, it makes no difference. So it's really up to just the gate, the person getting your boarding pass at the counter. That's the decision maker, that individual. And so there's 3 of us. We go through it. One of us, he gets a hard time, and I think he gets a little flustered. When you get flustered, when you try to push back, that you're just met with more resistance. And I wasn't there, so I don't know. Maybe I'm making this up. But what I think happened was giving him a hard time. He, resisted back, got in a bad, I at one point would have gotten a little worked up too. And then she made him, go through this whole complicated process to check all stuff. So he was all upset the whole ride home. Me and another guy get there like 2 hours later. And I always know this is going to be a potential problem. So I try to be the friendliest guy in the entire world because all that matters to me is that I can just bring both my bags on. That's the only outcome. It doesn't matter how I get there. That's the outcome I want. And so TJ, he's over there being just the kindest good old boy in the world. I'm over here just being the kindest good old boy in the world. We don't have any issues. We walk on. No problems at all. And so even like something that, and I could be misreading this, but I'm trying to draw some parallels here. Something even that simple. Hey, it's maybe I don't have the relationship, but it's even how I react and how I approach somebody. If I'm approaching someone for a fight, I'm probably going to get a fight. But if I'm, no matter how wrong they are, right I am, if I'm just as cool as a cucumber, we're good here. We're good here. I have the advantage in the situation. And I think that is totally true for building stuff out in the field. People get worked up. There's egos everywhere. People are tired, whatever it is. You have no idea what's happening in anybody's lives. And just so quickly people get worked up. And then what?
Yeah.
And then what?
End up in a $5 million legal dispute.
Yeah.
I think it's got to take a couple more steps to get there, but
that's where it starts. Like it, and again, maybe someone's listening to this like, this is the most naive fucking guy I've ever heard talk. But I do think a lot of times that's where it starts.
I would agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of times it doesn't start that way, of course, as you would expect as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it. I mean, from what I've seen on the sites, from what I've seen, because I'm just looking at it forensically, but you're hearing stories or you're you're having conversations like, why did this happen? And it's relationships go south. I mean, it happens. It happens a lot.
How many projects have you dug into at this point?
I don't know. 160, something like that. I've been doing this 4.5 years.
Does stuff like, do you ever see something now that's just like, whoa? Like, not that you have to get into specifics, but does anything surprise you? Or is it all pretty like, yeah, it's just kind of numbers? I don't know.
So I work for a guy by the name of Bill Schwarzkopf. He's been doing this since the 80s. He wrote a book called Calculating Construction Damages. He's written a book on surety. He's done, he's essentially seen, quote unquote, everything. And there's sometimes when I'm working with him and he's like, I've never seen this before. It's like, it's his famous line is, well, you have an interesting case. That means this is, you probably got a good story. But this is going to take some work. But if we do this the right way, it's going to be favorable for you, but it's going to be a slog. So sometimes it's real simple. So we usually, we get involved in a lot of big cases. We get involved, big cases. We get involved in a lot of big cases, small cases, interesting cases, unique cases. We're not doing a lot of the, the run of the mill simple stuff. But
one of my favorite cases is, and it's probably not a favorite of the people involved in this, but the tunnel boring machine that got stuck in Washington,
mm-hmm.
That was a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's still in litigation.
Probably.
I think it's still all tied up. If I'm not mistaken,
I haven't read
read
anything about that in ENR for a while, but I think it is still in litigation, but I don't remember.
That was a real pickle.
Yeah, you get this, 40-foot diameter.
It's the world's biggest at the time.
$9 gazillion tunnel boring machine that's stymied by a piece of 8-inch steel pipe.
Just piece of steel pipe, and then the contractor's like, "You didn't tell us it was there," and then the state's like, "Yeah, we did." So that's what the whole thing's about, though. Ultimately, is no, we did not know about that, and they're like, "No, you did." Like you can boil that entire multi-billion-dollar entanglement down to like he said, she said.
Yeah.
And then so now you have to go back into all the information and everything mm-hmm. to then, if you were involved in that, prove no, mm-hmm. the state did actually do that. Yeah, or the contractor, no, they actually didn't say anything about this, so of course you'd get around it.
So I know nothing about that case other than what I've read about online, articles or
mm-hmm.
Whatever, in particular.
Likewise, I'm just an outsider. Yeah.
So, but I mean, those cases are interesting because you'll have experts like me, and then you'll have engineering experts. You'll have a TBM expert. You'll have a materials, a pipe expert. You'll have a locate expert. You have all kinds. A lot of times you get into, when you start talking real big jobs, you'll have accounting experts, which is just this team of people that are coming in and they're just analyzing numbers up and down, left and right, just trying to figure out what the actual real damage is and supporting it and countering the expert from the other side that's doing the exact same thing with the exact same set of documents.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's interesting. It sucks for everybody involved, but it's, always hope for, a favorable outcome on those.
As you're working, do you ever like picture the other guy you're going up against who's trying to do the same thing you are? Mm-hmm. And like, does it motivate you? Mm-hmm. You're just like, I'm going to beat this guy. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to look at these numbers even harder.
There's a certain level of competitiveness that I grew up playing sports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I am probably more competitive, but I have to keep doing everything above board. I can't make anything up. I got to find the right document. I got to find the best quote. I got to clearly put it in the report so somebody understands it. But yeah, there's a certain level of competition. And now that I've been doing this long enough, there's couple times that I've gone against, the other expert. I've read reports that they've written on other cases. And so I'm like, okay, well, he did this on this other case, so maybe he's going to do the same thing here. Or,
nice.
My favorite is you go and look at a technical paper that the person wrote, and which is going to start happening to me pretty soon too.
Sure.
But you go and look at a technical paper that person wrote, and they're like, well, okay, you said you should do a measured mile analysis. You got this case. You could have done a measured mile analysis. You didn't. You did a total cost analysis or modified total cost analysis. So what's the, write some deposition questions about, hey, did you write this? When did you write this? Did you write this before you wrote this report? Why did you not, get a step it down through there a little bit, but, get to the meat of why didn't you do what you said you should do. So it's always pretty interesting. Yeah.
Your competitors are probably listening to this podcast right now.
I know. I've written one paper. It hasn't been published yet. So, yeah, no, it'll happen. I mean, I like I said, Bill wrote Calculating Construction Damages. I've worked on multiple cases where someone takes a quote out of that book and throws it back at him. And, there's nobody on the planet that knows that book better than he does. So it's always interesting when they do that. Sometimes they get a point and, it's okay, noted, but this, and this, we said what we said originally for a reason. And we're going to just, we're not going to recant that. But you clearly don't understand what we're trying to say. So let us explain it a different way or a better way.
This reminds me of my father. He was a lawyer, as I said, and he wrote these books on bankruptcy way back, decades ago, that then became like a core publication to some cases. And so, and I do appreciate growing up around this. This is one of the things that I really did take away. He would know that the other side is going to reference his work. And he wasn't in the litigation. He wasn't in the trial. He was just supporting those that were. He was always behind the scenes, wasn't a trial lawyer. But he would know. He would figure out which portions of the book that he wrote they were going to reference, and then engineer it against, like, try to know what move they were going to do using his own text, and then engineer it against them before they could even make the move. So then if he says, well, they're going to submit this and it's going to say this and it's going to request this information, so that they would submit it. And then 30 minutes later, here's your response.
I was expecting
to
this.
mess with them. Yeah. Because you can't do that in 30 minutes. So then they would know, oh fuck, this guy, he's ahead of us.
So not the same thing, but like we'll do, especially on the, in schedules, we're looking at Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering, or there's a little bit of American Society of Civil Engineers stuff that says, like, hey, this is how you're supposed to do schedule analysis. This is the science backup. This is, you tell you're writing a report, I follow this methodology, da-da-da. There's a lot of studies that have been done for different parts of construction, whether it's impacts from weather, impacts from excessive amount of change orders. Bill Ibbs has written studies after studies. He just gets access to these crazy databases of data, and figures out that when you get hit with a ton of change orders, especially late in the job, you're going to have a major productivity impact. There's a bunch of different weather ones. They're usually, a lot of them come from military stuff back in like the 50s, 60s. There's a lot of like thesis papers that are, Cooper's is a good one that I've used in a recent project, where, he can say, you're going to expect this much productivity loss when you are doing stuff in, heat, humidity, wind. Cold weather is obviously a big one.
That's interesting.
They did a lot of stuff on that in the as an Army base in Hanover, New Hampshire, and so the thing though is, especially on some of these newer studies, always got to read the study, because especially like ones that came out about COVID, which there wasn't a lot, surprisingly enough. There was a few, but there wasn't a lot. There was one that the other side used against us, and it was like, sure, you should expect a 14% decrease in productivity or whatever, except for the work that they're doing was outside. And if you look at the study, they did obviously there's a huge impact when you got two guys in a man lift working, installing conduit on 20, 30 feet up. Yeah. You're going to have a huge productivity impact. But when you're installing that conduit, outside, there was hardly any productivity impact.
So what they were saying was, we were slow because of COVID.
We were slow because of COVID.
And then you were like, well, but you were outside, and that doesn't actually hold.
And your study says that doesn't hold any water.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's you really got to get in the details, and that's one of the cool things about this job is, a good consultant is going to figure out how every single part of that construction worked. Okay, I've never built a solar plant, never built this, a 1 mile square of solar panels, but there's a process, and you have, essentially it's, if it's a square mile, you got 50 blocks, and then you break that down to, you got
Mm-hmm.
underground work, you got above ground work, you got foundations. There's a sequence in which they go in.
Yeah.
You really got to figure out the nuts and bolts, and then there's I don't know, 3 or 4 different methods for building those. You got the fixed panels, you got the ones that rotate following the sun, you got, there's just different ways that those are done, those are built. So you figure out each individual one of those, and you can really get into the details, and you can really explain a story of why somebody was impacted or delayed by really just figuring out the construction. We try to hire any consultant we hire. We try to get somebody like that came out of the field that actually has field experience.
Yeah.
There's a few, there's definitely a few people that have, come from the project controls world where they've been doing scheduling or accounting or, cost stuff their career, but, actually knowing the nuts and bolts and, how a construction site operates, it's really good.
What are the trends you're seeing?
What do you mean?
Where do you think the industry's headed?
I mean, on my side of things, I don't really have any kind of prediction on where the trends are going. I think this industry just kind of constantly is lagging a financial world. The construction financial thing. So it gets busier when the market's down because people have more time to fight about it and they want the cash coming in. But they, it's just kind of the cycle we see. I've been, like I said, 4.5 years. I haven't seen a lot of that. I don't foresee a trend of this industry going away. I don't see a trend of contractors all of a sudden getting along all the time and developers always paying their bills and GCs always paying the subs and stuff. It's the one thing that's going to be interesting is, just different AI stuff. I'm trying to figure out how we can use AI in what we do. It makes a lot of sense for document searches, for isolating out documents. So, we get projects that are, 3 years long that were done in 2014 through 16 or whatever. You could have 1 million pieces of paper, and you just get it on a zip stick nowadays. And, having something and really learning how to use that software to get the information so you don't have to look at every single one of those, which is obviously impossible. But, lawyers are using it to, write briefs, and, but you always got to check every single thing that the AI does. Yeah. We're trying to use it for different document searches and summarizations and timelines and stuff like that. It will get to be more useful. Right now, it's useful, but not like what it is in other industries.
A little clunky.
Yeah, it's a little clunky. We've demoed. I've been part of demoing a few different systems and trying to get it to provide us something. But once it starts being able to recognize schedules, spreadsheets, pictures, that type of stuff, it's gonna be a lot different. And just gonna have to learn how to. It's just as much education on how to use the system as what the system can be used for.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
All this is interesting. I think, a lot of people are really good at building stuff, and not to discount any of that, because that's why we're all here, and that's why I live the life I do, because of the people that build stuff. But I think those that can figure out the system and play within the system and really understand how contracts work and how money flows and how, documentation should be. And there's like these ingredients beyond just the building that I think if you're able to master, you can become a weapon. I think those are the most, I don't know if I want to say accomplished, but I think those are some of the most accomplished people I know in the industry, those that they play the game really well. They know it's, yes, building's important, but I also need to understand this. And if I don't understand this, I'm going to get my ass beat. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, like I said before, risk transfer. Just understanding that, understanding how you're going to, get what you, know what you have for risk and isolate a certain amount of risk and transfer a certain amount of risk. That's necessary for any good project manager, anybody that wants to come up through the industry. At least that's because that's what I see the most in my world. I'm sure there's, you got to know how to build stuff. You got to know how to interact with people. You got to know how to win. Just estimating stuff and winning the work. How to manage it, how to win it, how to take care of people, how to get people out on the job. There's all that kind of stuff. Which I get to bypass. I love doing what I'm doing because I'm not dealing with the front end loader that won't start anymore. Yeah. I'm dealing with the cost report and the schedule, and all of the stuff that I wanted to do as a project engineer for Kiewit or any other contractor I work for. I just get to deal with that kind of stuff constantly now.
Well, this isn't at face value fun and sexy stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that can sink companies quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had plenty of those cases. Yeah, it's just like if this company doesn't win, if we don't make this right, this company is going to go out of business.
And regardless how well, how many good things they're building, no matter what their culture looks like, if they don't get this right, it can take them out.
Yeah, millions of dollars. And they don't have millions of dollars in the bank to
just hang out,
float it through. Yeah.
Well, I know that, I know that's part of it too. Is sometimes in litigation, it's really just a matter of I can hang out longer here than you can, I know that, and so I'm just gonna, we'll get to it. No, actually, we need this document instead. There's so many things you can do to just try to make it slow.
I hate those. It is what it is. It's part of the business, and you either gotta weather the storm or you gotta figure out a way to push the issue. So I had a case, just a really small case that was kind of the same boat. They terminated our client, and we, they ended up saying, calling the bond. And wanted to get paid for, had wanted our client to pay all of the replacement contractors' work, which was, on a $400,000 contract was, $300,000, something extra. It's like, well, how did that happen? So we just, it's like, if this guy doesn't win this, he's probably not going to go, he's not going to be in business. Yeah. He's already struggling enough as it is. It's like, okay, let's write a good report and get this done, get this taken care of really quick. And just deposition questions were like, okay, do you have, this, the drawings show this was built. Okay. Yes, it was. Okay. Do you have a drawing to show that? Oh, I'll get that to you. And after 15, I'll get that to you. It turned into, let's just settle this.
Yeah.
So it's I'm not going to get that to you because, probably I don't have it. And frankly, that person, our replacement contractor, didn't build what your client was supposed to build. And we didn't keep very good track of all that. We don't know what's up and what's down. So let's settle. Perfect. Exactly. It was just what we wanted.
How often do you see ego play a role in this?
I don't.
You're not
sure. There's a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've never walked out of a meeting. I've never signed a report or finished a report and been like, this is all due to ego.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Yeah. I'm sure it's part of it. It's not really a focus. So I just don't notice it. And that might just be my ignorance to it too.
Yeah.
So, definitely the case.
Well, this is all an education for me. I've never been a part of any of this world.
Yeah.
I know it goes on, so I know just enough, little baby bit, but it's a whole world that I don't know about because it largely just goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of shit people don't talk about too. I've realized, and it sucks. It sucks that people don't talk about it because this is the real nitty gritty of business is litigation. But you can't talk about litigation because one, it's litigation, so you actually can't talk about it. And then two, okay, cool, yeah, you settle it, this and that. So technically now you can legally talk about it, but you're not going to go talk about it because I don't want future customers or current employees or future employees to be knowing that I'm getting sued, even though everybody else is in lawsuits as well, and we all know it. And so it's like this behind closed doors conversation, really hush hush. I've only, honestly, even in my I very rarely hear anything about it. But it's like, this is the kind of stuff you want to hear about because this is the kind of stuff, again, that can put you under. And it's a shame that it can't be talked about more because a lot of people would benefit from either avoiding stuff that is avoidable or at least being prepared for stuff that's unavoidable.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing we're getting into more and more, so the company I work for, or the company I started with was acquired by a bigger company, and they do a lot of accident reconstruction, premises liability, and biomechanics work. So we're getting into like personal injury, providing construction expertise on accidents related to construction, whether it's bad construction that injured a user or construction site accidents that the attorney needs to provide an affirmative claim or an affirmative case, and have somebody testify that the contractors were at fault, and you're getting into the means and methods of what a contractor did or most likely didn't do that caused some type of accident. So we're getting a few of those coming from that side of the company. So it's a whole nother world, pretty interesting, which, most of my experience has been with damage and delay stuff, but that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've enjoyed this conversation. Sorry it's not more complex, because I'm not educated on this at all, but it is quite interesting to learn about. If
it got more complex, I think everybody fell asleep. So.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can get way into the weeds on this stuff.
You really can.
We could have spent an hour just getting into the weeds about schedules and how to analyze schedules.
You want to talk case law? I mean, let's go.
I don't at all. I don't at all. Yeah. Yeah, I want to know what I need to know and nothing more, because that's what people like you are for. You're the expert. But yeah, I know I really appreciate you coming down, reaching out. I know you have these notes here. I don't even know what's in there, but I don't know if you have something you're just dying to say.
No, you're a master of conversation. You get everything in the notes without even looking at it.
I wouldn't go that far, but I try to.
You've done this long enough. You know what to do.
We're just on a walk. We're just going over here, going over there. Cool. Well, thanks for coming by.
Cool. Thanks for having me.